Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the book launch of the Indian Media Business, Pandemic and After. This is the fifth edition of the book, the first one launched in 2003. The book is the brainchild of Ms. Vanita Kohli-Khandekar, who is one of the leading media journalists and has been covering the media and entertainment business for almost 2 decades now. She is a columnist and writer for Business Standard. The first session of the event is a one-on-one conversation between Ms. Kohli-Khandekar and Ashwini Ganguly, executive editor at AFAX, on the 5 big challenges impacting the Indian media business. Over to you.
Thank you, Debashish. Hi, Vanita. Hi, audience. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this virtual book launch. Vanita, I was thinking of all the adjectives I'm going to use in this little intro of mine for your book. Okay, I've been reading it over the last fortnight or so, and yeah, sure, it's the most definitive book on the subject. It's essential reading for everybody in media, students, professionals, everybody. It's an educative tool. Okay, pretty much like the previous editions. It's all of that, but this one is special. Okay, so the adjective I'm going to go with, Vanita, is intimate, because that's how closely you've examined the impact of a global public health crisis and consequent economic crisis on the Indian M&E space. You've taken us through very beautifully how it's been battered and bruised by the pandemic. So thank you for that, and thank you for putting a number to everything that matters. So that's my little 2 bits. I want to dive into my first question because we have only 15 minutes. So my first question, Vanita, is about the healing process. Okay, so I'm very interested to know what really needs to happen for Indian media to heal. From here, where and in what order do these things need to happen? Now, there is the obvious, we need a pandemic-free country, sure, but there is the not so obvious. And over to you for that. So you can break up your answer by medium also. Print needs this to happen first, digital needs that to happen. So you can break it up by media platform.
You're absolutely right, Ashwini, and it's part of one of the first things that I always say when we are discussing this book is that you have to now cleave the history of this business into 2 halves. First is the pre-pandemic era, and the post-pandemic era starts in 2020. The base year is 2020. Please don't look at growth, business plans, anything from the pre-2020 era. Right. So 2020 is year 0 or ground 0, and that's where it starts from. What it needs to heal, of course, is, and I don't think the healing process can start before, if you're talking about healing or rebuilding businesses. To my mind, healing is rebuilding businesses when people start hiring by the bushels again. When it's not just getting audiences. I think they got audiences aplenty in the pandemic. What they did not get is revenues. What they lost was jobs. I think for all of that to come back, I don't see it happening before 2023. You need a fully vaccinated country. And when I say fully vaccinated, children are vaccinated too. You need people stepping out without fear and masks. That's when, you can make the films that you want to make, because right now the films, the shows, everything that you make is restricted by a whole lot of other things. So when I say healing, it means that everything has to be functioning for this business to come back full throttle. And we are right now, in terms of size, we are at 2016 level. We've fallen that much. Right. So you can imagine how many years it could take if that healing is not complete. So one is that, and I think, and some of this process has already started during the pandemic, especially when it comes to print and when it comes to a whole lot of other segments. I am seeing a huge drive and a lot of interest in investment going towards subscription products. I mean, publisher after publisher, whether it's a television company, whether it's a newspaper company, is talking about productizing, they're talking about AI, they're talking about the investment and the capital needed. And that is the second thing you need, capital, lots of it. I mean, Ms. Vijli will be joining us later in the session. PVR, I mean, companies like PVR have borne a huge chunk of the brunt of this pandemic. For them to come back, you need print companies which need to productize. I was speaking to Satyam Gajwani, if you remember, at an AFAX event.
That's right, yeah.
That kind of investment for, I don't think we are very good at producing news, producing films, producing TV shows. We are not as good at monetizing them. And what the pandemic has done is pushed us to look at monetizing them better. And I think that is part of that investment coming in. It's become difficult to put capital in many parts of the business, but it's easy in some other parts. So hopefully that should come in. So capital, full vaccination, and I think a drive towards more de-risking of revenue sources. I think these are key to the healing process, if I may. That's a nice word, by the way.
Yeah, it's a little poetic, and I was wondering whether it even fits.
You're a poetess.
Yeah, but I went with it anyway. So Vanita, if it makes sense, tell us, where will this healing start? Which medium will lead the way? That's the follow-up question to this, and also the question above my head. What are the 5 big changes affecting the Indian media business? So that's the second question for you.
If you say which medium will lead it, to my mind, the medium which will signal the coming back of media and entertainment in full flow has to be films, because films is, as I always say, the Gangotri of everything in this business. It feeds every element of this business. It feeds news, it feeds music, it feeds TV, it feeds OTT. When films jump back to health is when you'll see a large part of the ecosystem also, sort of stepping up. It was also an indicator, people are stepping out, watching. So I think print coming back to health, though everybody loves to write off this thing. TV is caught in a regulatory mess, and you'll read you're probably reading a lot about that right now.
Yeah.
So TV doesn't need as much healing as it needs a regulatory free hand. What's the second question you asked? Sorry.
The main one, in broad strokes, what are those 5 big changes affecting the Indian media space?
Okay. Can I do a slightly this thing and just show you a few slides? Because to my mind, I picked them up from the book, but it was part of the research process, and this explains things a little better to you. One sec, I'll just share my screen with you. Yeah, is that visible to everybody?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the Indian media industry in terms of size, Ashwini. It's $19 billion. The first big change, like I mentioned earlier, was size. What has changed is size. This was the last edition I wrote was in 2013. This was just a cover of the edition. From then to 2019, the business doubled in size. Across the board, there was growth, print, TV, etc. Everybody grew. What happened in the pandemic, and this is the current edition, what happened during the pandemic? We saw audiences jump for everything. I mean, don't bother about the specifics of the charts here, but the audience for everything jumped up. But the revenue for everything except digital fell. Digital rose marginally by about 1,300 crore or 1,500 crore, very, very marginally. So films, of course, saw a massive fall in audience because you're looking at only theatrical here. Okay, so you have seen a business which has come down to its 2016 level. That's the first big change, and we discussed it earlier. Yeah. The second big change, and this is the best way to explain it, is the way the composition of this industry and where it is going or where it's evolving. You see the top 10 companies in 2010 and you see the top 10 companies in 2021. The 2021 list has companies which are unknown in 2010. There's Google, there's Tata Sky, there's Netflix, and I'm sure a whole lot of companies, if their figures were easily available, might make it to this list. The fact is, this ecosystem is changing hugely. What is a media company, or what defines media? It is now a 360-degree thing. It's in your social life, it's in your professional life. You could be attending prayer meetings online. So media is no longer about leisure and entertainment. When the American associations measure it, they used to measure leisure hours and spend on leave. It's not that. Now it's 24 hours. So what then is a media company? And that's the third thing, that the way a media company looks, feels, or what business it does is completely, it is not about having one newspaper or one TV channel or one website. And that's a discussion which we are having in the next 10 minutes with this fantastic panel that I have. Okay. This to my mind is, and in this new ecosystem, there are 4 or 5 companies, Apple, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Comcast. You'll see these 4 or 5 companies are dominating the world of media and entertainment as far as this new evolving ecosystem. They are looking for audiences across the world. Is there an Indian media company which can compete with them? No. Zee is the only company with any scale, and Zee could possibly have another owner in the next few months. Where India comes with a strength, and I can't emphasize this enough, if everybody had to take out one thing from this book, I would say take this. This is Indian media's KBC moment. What KBC did for Star India in 2000, OTT, digital, internet can do for our industry if we know how to leverage it. It has given us our big crossover moment. You know, remember, Ashwini, did you see My Name is Khan or Dangal? These were our biggest crossover films. And they took a lot of effort. You know, Foxstar had to do, you know, roll out the carpet across the world. Dangal, Disney had to do so much work across the world for Dangal to become what it did. But when a family man releases across 200 countries, it premieres across 200 countries. Sacred Games, a Love Stories, a remix. I mean, you name them. It's not just OTT. It's even, you know, whether it's a news channel, whether it's a newspaper, the ability to cross our content over has increased humongously. And if you say that this is one country which has a strong storytelling tradition, India, Korea, these are the 2-3 countries which have a strong local industry. There is no import quota. There is no ceiling on the number of films or shows that can come into India, correct? Yet 90% of this market is local. Why is it local? Because our storytellers are so good. People want to watch Indian stories, shows, films, you know, have it whichever way. And for now you imagine these two things are crossing over. The changing ecosystem and our storytelling ability. This is our moment in time. If we don't leverage this, we lose our moment in history for us to do something as a country in a creative business. And you know, in other countries, governments nurture this ability. The UK, Dutch, I've seen these governments nurture this ability. We need to do that. We don't celebrate this industry at all. And that is my second point, that there's a regulatory overload happening, whether it is the TRAI going after broadcasters, whether it is a digital media ethics code, you know, every which way. I think we need to celebrate and enjoy this industry a little more than we do. And sorry, Ashwini, I'm going on. You said only 5 changes and I'm going on a bit. Just bear with me for one last point. Sure. You know, why this industry matters? It's not just that it's less than 1% of GDP. It can become 5-7% of GDP. It is among the highest tax-paying industries. It employs 3 million people. I'm just talking about 3 industry segments. Wow. And it is the best marker. You've traveled abroad. All of us have traveled abroad. I don't know how many times a cabbie in how many countries, in how many conferences people will ask you about Amitabh Bachchan and Shah Rukh Khan and this and that. These are soft power markers. China doesn't have them. We have them. We really need to celebrate it. So that is my sort of 5 big changes and 5 big things that we need to hold on to and use to propel further growth.
Perfect. No, that's very, very well summed up. Thank you for that, Vanita. You've answered the questions perfectly. Debashish, I think it's time to bring the panel in, right?
Yes. Sure. Thank you so much, Ashwini. Moving on to the next session, which is a panel discussion with top media stalwarts on what is a media company. On the panel, we have Mr. Ajay Bijli, Chairman and MD, PVR Cinemas, Ms. Kallipuri, Vice Chairman, India Today Group, Mr. Rasmus Claes Nielsen, Director at Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism and Professor of Political Communication at University of Oxford, and Mr. Satyan Rajan, Director of YouTube Content Partnerships, India at YouTube. This session will be moderated by Vanita Kohli-Khandekar. Welcome, everyone. Over to you, ma'am.
Hi, now I should stop speaking because I have these fantastic people in the same room with me and I wish this was physical. So I'm having a little fanboy, fangirl moment here because all these are minds which I really admire. You know, I'm just using this Marshall McLuhan quote, which has been, I've sort of stretched it to say something else, that if all media is an extension of some human faculty, then the online world now is an extension of everything we do, our memories, consciousness, self-image. And for lots of young people, even their sense of self-worth comes from how they look on an Instagram post and, you know, how they feel about it. And this is the point at which we stop sharing this presentation. You know, when I look at my 12-year-old who gets up and attacks the iPad, has online classes, he's online for, I think, most of his day, you wonder where it is that when it is that media started becoming an attachment of our lives and stopped becoming something that you indulge in your leisure time. And that's where I want to start from. Mr. Bijli, you are in Bombay. opening your theaters and the first person, because the films are closest to my heart. For everybody in the audience, Ajay Bijli runs the largest film company in India, and they were the ones. I mean, this industry is the one which has borne a fair degree of the brunt of this pandemic. As you see this ecosystem evolving, what is PVR becoming? You've tried gaming, you've tried high-end gourmet food. I've even eaten the wood-fired oven pizza at one of your thingies. But what is PVR becoming? Not just the pandemic, but in this changing ecosystems.
Well, first of all, thank you, Vanita, for having me, and hello to all of you. Amazing group of co-panelists here. Hi, Kali. How are you doing? Yeah, so, we've always been focused on exhibition only. There was a huge headroom for growth in the cinema exhibition industry for the longest time. Mm-hmm. And, as you know, if I just give some numbers, India only had about 8,000 odd screens. I'm also including single screens, obviously post-pandemic. We're still in the middle of pandemic, so I'm saying post-pandemic. But the 1,500 screens have shut down as well. So our goal at PVR was only to keep bringing quality exhibition facilities at different price points across the country. US had 40,000 screens, China had 70,000 screens, and cinema and India, as I said, only 8,000 screens. But pre-pandemic, when it happened, nobody could anticipate it. So everybody, all of a sudden, everybody started looking at their, strategies. And from being somebody who was only focused on exhibition, obviously now we are thinking that what else is to be done. So currently, if you ask me what is PVR as a media company, PVR is an exhibition company. All those other things that you spoke about is too early in the day for us to do anything now, because we've been in the survival mode for the last 18 months. The pandemic completely annihilated us. From a company which was having 100 million people coming to our cinemas. And I don't like talking numbers, but you're from Business Standard as well, and I'm a listed company. So from 3,500 crores revenue, 650 crores EBITDA, suddenly it came to zero, March 15, 2020. So at that time, you have a burn rate of about 100 crores a month. You don't start looking at reinvention. You start looking at how do you make sure that your boat doesn't sink and it stays afloat. But obviously this, I still believe in the exhibition business very strongly. I still believe that India has a lot of headroom for growth. At the same time, I don't believe that one should be putting all his eggs in one basket, because that can create a... So therefore, media company, you can go anywhere from here. You can get into content, you can get into content creation. Content distribution is going to be tough because you have behemoths. You have people like Amazon, you have Netflix, you have massive companies who've done a brilliant job of streaming. So suddenly you can't wake up one day and you say you want to be a platform. There are about 50 odd platforms all over the world who are struggling, but only 4 or 5 names keep coming up again and again. So we need to rethink the strategy, but the core of PVR will always remain exhibition business. Because as I said, earlier in my interactions with you, I'm sorry, I'm taking too much time in giving an answer, but because 70% of the revenues of any content that gets created for the big screen still comes from theatrical. And 1.45 billion tickets got sold in India, prior to the pandemic. So this was a massively long interruption, not disruption, according to me, because disruption is a very destructive word, and I don't like it that much. I think it was an interruption, but things will come back as soon as we can get the pandemic under control and it becomes an endemic. And also when the capacity restrictions which the government has put just now on us, they get removed. So I think continue to remain an exhibition company, but around it, we need to build an ecosystem which can make us a media company which is much more diversified rather than just focusing on one thing.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you on that. Rasmus, a whole lot of your work is at the interaction or intersection of the old and new, as you say, you said it on your intro. What do you mind, and because you look at it across the world and for news firms especially, what do you mind is the media firm morphing into?
Well, I mean, I think that a lot of news publishers historically thought of themselves as content companies that were in the business of competing for attention and selling content to audiences. I think what the move to digital and the rise of platforms has revealed is that a lot of news publishers in reality were in the business of distributing advertising. And some of them sort of said it out loud, and that produced some controversy in amongst sort of more idealistic members of their newsrooms. But it was a pretty honest assessment of what the business actually was in many cases. And the move to digital means that news publishers who thought they were content companies, but really were the distribution of advertising companies, now are content companies. And they are finding that when we've moved from an environment where people had limited choice to an environment in which people have very high choice, being a content company is extremely competitive market with very strong winner takes most dynamics. And a lot of niches where people can win in those niches, whether they are by geography or by culture or by interest or by community. But that the sort of the middle, if you will, where there was a large number of sort of mid-sized titles competing against one another with modest differentiation beyond just the fact that they were headquartered in different parts of the country or different parts of the world, that is where we're really seeing very, very tough headwinds for companies that are struggling to convince people that they have things that are distinct enough to make them one of the few winners or one of the people who really come to occupy a niche. So I think it's a very challenging environment. I'd also say that it's an environment where for news publishers, while it is very challenging, and I think we will see few winners and many losers, perhaps particularly in a market such as India, where print revenues and broadcast revenues are still underwriting investments in digital, and where companies are still highly reliant on revenues, I think we have to expect will continue to be in structural decline for a very long time, and where I see no reason to believe that they will pick up beyond sort of cyclical bumps, which is, I think some economists call it dead cat bounce. Even a dead cat will bounce. And of course, they face, as was just said, a new set of competitors that are international and that are platforms that are not publishers. And in that sense, not media companies, but of course, in other ways, are media companies in that they compete for attention in advertising and do so off the back of huge economies of scale, huge network effects and huge data network effects that makes it very, very difficult to go up against them on a direct basis, and means that a lot of media companies have to think very hard about whether they want to try to compete with them head on head, or whether there are forms of coexistence or collaboration that, while unwelcome for companies that used to occupy the commanding heights of the media economy but don't do anymore, might be preferable to sort of picking battles that realistically you can't really win unless you secure backing from politicians who may have an agenda that isn't entirely aligned with the ambition of being editorially independent.
That's quite provocative. Kali, I'd like you to come in here among the top 5 news publishers in India in terms of, I think 167 million uniques is the last figure I've seen for you. But what is the glue which holds it together? And what do you say to, the fact is that the platforms will dominate. Like I said, there are 5 or 6 companies and everybody's battle is now a battle for audiences. It doesn't matter what content you're selling. What is the glue which is holding together a company like the India Today Group? And, how do you sort of take it to the next level? You're mute.
Thank you, Vanita, for having me here. Can I just take the liberty to add on to something that you said about your book before I answer your question, about this healing process that you talked about in media. And you said that the healing process for the Indian media will start when people start rebuilding businesses and start rehiring. I'd like you to know that the India Today Group is today 10% more in terms of people than it was in 2020. So we are hiring and rehiring very aggressively even now. And the second light I'd like to say is Ajay. He's had like such a tough run for the last 2 years, but he smiles and he's so optimistic about the business. So, I feel that that's 2 big healing lights or, pointers for you to say that, look, the healing is started and the healing process is starting from news and from cinema, So I just wanted to kind of add to that. Okay, to go back to your actual question. I think the glue that holds the India Today Group together really is that we see ourselves as storytellers, right? And not pieces of content, because storytelling has to be empathetic, sympathetic. It has to evoke an emotion. It has to evoke a reaction. It has to come from a place that a human being can understand another human being. That's storytelling. Giving information, yes, platforms can do that. Robots can do that. AI can do that. But only humans can tell stories that touch hearts. And that is the glue that holds the India Today group together. We have always been, from the magazine business, when we started in 1975, platform agnostic. We are not like, oh, we are just a paper company and let's protect our revenue in somewhere else. That's not how we see it. If you're a storyteller, every new platform, whether it's OTT, whether it's the internet, offers you a new place to tell your story, so to access larger audiences and new tools. I mean, the internet gives just so many amazing tools to tell stories, to immerse the viewers, to add audio, to add video, to add interaction. It's just amazing platform. And I know that you're saying that, where is the space for news media companies when platforms are there? But Satya would tell you that he's very supportive of us and he loves the work that we do. And, that it's synergistic. Our work together works together. He can't do what he does unless I do what I do. In the end, I see YouTube as a newsstand. We always had that. In 1975, also when we were selling our magazines, we had newsstands. It's just that he is a fantastic, much more upgraded newsstand for the new generation. And we have a newsstand which is infinite. So of course, it gives him far more powers, right, on what he pushes and what he doesn't than the traditional newsstand guy who had a limited show window, if you can say that, right? But it doesn't take away from what I do. Unless I have something to put on YouTube, what does Satya do? I mean, yes, he can create some amount of his own originals, but it doesn't take away from the fact that what we do is unique, and we will, thrive. I think that you're absolutely right that this is the KBC moment of media. You didn't talk so much about news, but I think that the news guys did very well during the pandemic. We were the only guys who were fully open, right? Yeah. So we've actually had a very good year in one way of telling not very nice stories, actually, pretty terrible stories, but it's our duty and our responsibility to do that.
Correct. Super. That's very well said. YouTube is a newsstand. Satya, anyway, my first question to you was, you educate, inform, entertain, and you answer all the questions in the world. I know that you can't speak on behalf of Google, but let's talk about YouTube. What is YouTube? And you and I have had this discussion several times before, but I want you to bring out the answers here.
Yeah, I think someone very famous once said that it's a mystery wrapped in a conundrum or something like that. So I'd like to borrow that quote from a not so famous politician, I think. But first, I just want to congratulate you, Vanita, on the launch of this book. I'm making a little bit more space in my bookshelf now for all your books, which are going to have pride of place out there. Looking forward to many more. And great to be on this panel. So I think we have one answer we already have. So Kalli has said that YouTube is a newsstand, right? And we are honored and we are indebted to publishers like Kalli, to many other partners and creators for making YouTube their home. It gives us a lot of responsibility on how to a sense of responsibility on how to grow this business, right? So you're right. YouTube, traditionally started off as more of a place where traditional media put their content for either syndication or distribution or even promotion. But over the years, the original mission of YouTube was always about allowing anyone to really put their voice, their point of view, their ideas, and their insights onto the platform. And that has never been true. And it's never been truer than what we are seeing today, because we are seeing all kinds of people create content. And I think therein also is another definition of a media company, which is the earlier media company was curated, was perhaps gated, but the media company of today and the future is open, where people can come, put content, seek their audiences, use the power of technology, use the power of their voices to even then build a business on top of what they're doing, and not just with one revenue stream. So for example, I've always loved traditional businesses like television and newspapers, where there are two revenue streams which are sitting in front of you from day one, which is advertising and subscriptions. But the newer media company, and we've done a lot of experiments there, We've got about 8 to 10 revenue streams that a partner can tap into. And I expect Kali to call me after this call and then ask me why, how, and why haven't we done it before or already. So I'll wait for your call, Kali. I think therein lies another definition of what is YouTube or what is a media company. It allows people to actually tap into more than one revenue stream to build a business of their choice or of passion. And I'm going back to that quote by the gentleman whose name I've forgotten, which you had right at the beginning of this session, where he talked about how media is a reflection of the individual. And I think that really is also fundamentally important to acknowledge, because years ago, I think all of us, right? I'm not trying to reveal your age, Vanita, but years ago, all of us were unidimensional and homogeneous in the way we were brought up, right? So the only two things that I ever wanted to be growing up was to be an engineer or a doctor in that sense, right? But today, times have changed. We've become much more heterogeneous as people. Within us lies, a closet writer. Within us is a part-time ukulele player. Within us is actually a cook. Within us is someone who seeks escape from content like you see on Netflix and things like that. And all of that has been possible because of platforms like YouTube, because of partners like Kali, who are now able to actually create, content which spans across many dimensions and many planes of engagement, right? And Kali herself has just recently, she talked about all the terrible things she had to report. And that was stimulus for her to launch a channel called Good News, right? So I think it's just fantastic the way media is evolving. So I'm extremely hopeful and enthusiastic, and I'm very, very hopeful for Mr. Bijli as well. I'm waiting for the theaters to open at the PVR Phoenix, which is closest to where I stay, and I'm going to watch the first movie.
This is this is a dominant platform talking. And this is not, I'm not saying it in a bad sense, and it's good you guys have built it, it's your hard work. But your outlook changes when you come from when you're PVR or when you're Netflix or or when you are the Times of India. Now, how much does your outlook change depending on the business or the segment you're coming from? And whether you're a fresh new brand. So Netflix was, tried various things before it became a studio. I would call it a studio aggregator. But how much does your outlook change? And I want Ajay and Rasmus in on this. But first, Ajay, how does your outlook change? And B, how important has capital become? Because, I see a whole lot of this battle when we talk about platforms that are essentially 5 or 6. And capital is a huge, huge, huge thing which is going to come into play here. How do you see this shaping up? Because, I mean, for you, for example, online may have shortened windows, for example, but it doesn't mean the physical has gone away. But what are the battles that going ahead being involves morphing into this new ecosystem?
No, as I said, I mean, something like this, an event like this, a global event like this, obviously will make everybody introspect and question, the strategies that you've had all your life. As I said, 31 years ago, I felt that there was a gap in creating a very high quality cinema circuit, and India had the huge headroom to make a fabulous cinema circuit. The conduit that was connecting the film goers to the filmmakers, I thought was not world class. And that's where I felt there was a lot of headroom. But of course, an event like this makes you question your strategies. And then you say, fine, what do? Do you suddenly renounce what you've done in the last 35 years because of one aberration that happened in 24 months? Or you say, no, I still have a path to go and still there is headroom to grow. Or you say, okay, fine, 80% or 70% of my resources will still end up being allocated to your core business, but you must do what studies in Harvard say, exploration. You just don't keep doing exploitation of your business, even though there is headroom there. Any good company has to dedicate itself to exploration. And that's what we're doing now. But I don't want to blindly get into it, because you can burn your fingers very badly as well. So I need to ensure that what does PVR stand for? It is synonymous with movies. It's synonymous with movie going, a certain quality. What is it that we can build around it? And that's what we're working relentlessly on. I'm quite convinced that it should, according to me, should not be just exhibition business only, much as I love the business. and something, because the world is changing, the consumer behavior is changing, and I'll become a dinosaur very soon if I stick to what I'm doing, because it has done well.
Where is this exploration leading you? I mean, are there some areas? Because there's gaming, you guys are offering gaming in the theaters, somebody's offering saying, come and watch IPL. But where is this exploration?
You say exploration has to be beyond my shutters.
Correct.
Because, you know, the shutters going down, my income becoming binary and then coming to zero has already taught me a big lesson. Because even if I do gaming, we are doing gaming recently, we're showing the ICC cricket games as well just now. But that's all shutters up, revenue comes, shutters down, no revenues. So now we're looking at what is it that PVR can do to monetize and its brand and the consumer base that we've got outside the shutters, outside the physical bricks and mortar business that we've built. And there are a number of examples all over the world people have done with exhibition business. And as I said, content creation is one area. Streaming, I'm a little skeptical of just now. Streaming is fantastic because people have done an excellent job. It's very difficult to now, you know, Netflix's, Amazon, I mean, everybody's done a brilliant job. Apple, behemoths are there. And you can't just suddenly get up one day and become a, you know, me too and try to burn your fingers. So we have to still think about what needs to be done. As I said, I was in a rescue frame of mind in the last 18 months. So my reinvention frame of mind is going to take some time. And Satya, first day, first show for you, Bond movie, definitely.
Great. Kali, you made a very important point, and I want you and Rasmus in here. You said that it's about storytelling, and Rasmus, a whole lot of the growth is going to platforms because they seem to know how to get audiences and they seem to know how to aggregate audiences across genres, across geographies, across tastes, across everything. You know, is it, and this is a question I want both of you to address, is it easier for legacy companies or tougher? And how much of that mix of tech and content, what is the ideal mix? I mean, should Kali be a content provider which depends on different newsstands, or should she go and become a much larger platform? I don't know. I'm sure news publishers across the world grapple with this. What do you see? And what are some of the interesting examples, Rasmus? And Kali, I want you to step in from your perspective.
Who do you want to go first, Vanita?
Rasmus, I would like Rasmus to take this first because he comes from a...
I have the much easier job, you know, Kali and I just have the very tough job of actually doing these things in practice. And I can sit in an office in Oxford and try to sound smart. So I have a lot more respect for the challenges you face. And I know that none of this is easy. And I think we need to recognize that. I mean, I'd say that legacy organizations move into this with huge assets, right? I mean, they have brand names that are known and loved by millions of people. They have talent in their organization, experience, and they often have archives as well that give them, you know, evergreen content that could be reused in different ways as long as they have the rights to it. I also think it's clear that they have challenges. They often have a cost structure that reflects the world of yesterday rather than the world of today or perhaps the world of tomorrow. Sometimes the same culture that can be an advantage in cultivating excellence can also turn out to be a little bit conservative. I think Dean Baquet at the New York Times says that the Times has a problem with distinguishing between things they do because it's habit and things they do because it's mission. And I think that's quite a strong challenge in a lot of legacy organizations. And finally, I think there could be a little bit of a chance of lock-in, of seeing problems in terms of how do we replace the revenue we're losing rather than thinking of opportunities in terms of how can we create value for people and capture a reasonable share of that value. So the way I would say is that I think on balance, legacy organizations are probably better off than people who start from scratch because of the assets that they have. But if I were thinking about this either as someone working in a legacy organization or as someone who had stake or was considering investing in a legacy organization, I would look very closely at the balance between exploitation and exploration. And I'd look very closely at the investment in R&D and in talent development in the organization. Legacy publishers who aren't investing in R&D and talent development and aren't setting aside resources for exploration, they're running their company as if the world tomorrow will be the same as it was yesterday, and that's demonstrably wrong. That's a false assumption, and it's a short-sighted strategy. I think the new entrants, while they have some challenges, is essentially, you know, how can you scale to sustainability in an extremely competitive environment? If they have an advantage, it's perhaps this. It is that they, I think, can make a clearer choice about what they want to be. Do they want to be content companies that seek a direct route to market and prioritize a direct connection with their users? That doesn't preclude relying on platforms, but it means you use platforms very differently. You use them as a top of funnel rather than as a primary way of reaching people. Do they want to do that? That's clearly the strategy of a number of subscription and membership-based organizations across the world, including in news. Or do they see themselves primarily as complementers who recognize the existence of platforms, recognize they're very good at what they're doing, and are likely to continue to dominate much of the digital economy for a long time to come, and think about what place they can find within the platform ecologies, ideally a number of platforms, so they're not relying on a single one when someone in California twitch a knob and sends the traffic spiking or plummeting, and think about what opportunities might exist there. I think the latter is hard for news publishers who've always seen themselves, again, as sort of the kings of the content economy, if you will. And it's also clear that it's been hard to find sustainable business models for news production, specifically on platforms. But I think it is worth recognizing, stepping back, Vanita, as you do in your work, and looking at the media economy more broadly, that if we look at the creator economy, at app development, or at mobile games, there are billion-dollar businesses built off the back of being complementers to much larger platforms. So sometimes this is sort of a very sort of antagonistic relationship, a very competitive relationship, but it's also clear that there are opportunities. And I think the one advantage new entrants may have is that they can make a clearer choice about whether they want to be complementers or whether they seek their own fortune. But I would still, on balance, say that legacy organizations have an edge because of the incredible value of having a well-known brand and a history and a tradition and a skill set of storytelling, as Kali talked about.
That's heartening to hear. Kali, I want you to what are the strengths you come with?
Yes. So I just want to pick up on something Rasmus said earlier, and in the spirit of the university that you come from, argument and debate is always good to come to a better conclusion. I take umbrage to the fact that news media is a network to deliver advertising. I know that some of my rivals have said that in a public, but that is anathema to us. I mean, that would be the last thing we would do. And in the pandemic, I think news organizations like ourselves have proven that we are not a network for advertising. Advertisers don't want to come in on bad news when you are showing people dying, gasping for oxygen. And we still continue to do our duty. We didn't say, okay, we can't deliver any advertising, so we're not going to do our duty. We're not going to do a news. So I don't agree with that completely. Maybe we're a boutique news organization and we haven't grown at the same rate as maybe some of our rivals. And maybe the reason for that is because we don't see ourselves as an advertising network. We see ourselves as storytellers and people who do service to the country that we live in delivering the news that we do. Sorry, Vanita, there's just a thing from what Rasmus said earlier. And just to go back to your question. Look, what Rasmus said, and I think he put a very good framework to it, how do media organizations decide their relationship with platforms? The India Today group very early decided that we wanted to work with the platforms. I think platforms like YouTube and Satya's team brings in incredible expertise and technology. Even if I hired the best people, I may not be able to get in the ideas and the tech platforms that they do. So working with them is really being helpful to us, right? The idea is to work with all of them, not say that I'm just a YouTube company or I'm just a Facebook company, but work with all of them. They're just incredible at what they do. And if you can figure out a way to work with them, I think that's much more beneficial to both of us. So we took that decision very early on and we didn't sort of vacillate. I know a lot of the big media companies vacillated. Should we work with them? Should we not work with them? Jump in bed with them, come out, etc. Right? So I don't believe that, we are the wife of the platforms. They don't consider us their wife. We are not like wedded to them. We're more like the mistress, right? Which they kind of want to, I know. So I think that's the space where kind of we see ourselves, right? And we've really enjoyed working with the platforms. Not only have we grown our legacy business, but we have created new businesses which are just resting on these platforms. Now, of course, it worries me a little bit that it's on the goodwill of Satya and his team, right, that the businesses do survive. But so far, they have proven to be very, very good partners. And our entire tech ecosystem is actually built on YouTube. And today it's 27 channels, Vanita. I couldn't even, I didn't know where that was going to go. So 27 channels, right? 12 different genres and languages. It has its own P&L, its own business model, and it's profitable. Plus, I want to go back to something else Rasmus said, and that was really important about, how legacy businesses have the skills and the assets, but they may have some legacy issues which they're not able to get rid of, which young companies can. And I think we've solved that problem by incubating digital firsts, like London Top, like the esports division that we've set up, right? Which is incubated within the India Today group. So it has some of the advantages of being in a big company, but they have their own, chart or their own path to follow. So London Top, which is a small media company for Hindi millennials, has its own path. It doesn't follow the same rules, regulation, legacy of the India Today group. Most people don't even know it's part of the India Today group.
Yeah.
So it's a good way to solve that problem that Rasmus mentioned and have the benefit of both. That's really my answer.
Okay, I'm getting messages, but I want one last question for Satya. Satya, there is this whole thing about platforms and their dominance. And it's a question I'm sure you face across the world. How do you balance the two? How does YouTube become, he's the big boy in the class, but he's also a good boy. So I want the big boy to be my friend. How do you balance this? Because the fact is you need the creators, but you have the power, the AI, the capital, and many of the publishers are not even at a fraction of your scale. So how do you balance the two?
Yeah, no, I think the answer could have got, the answer to your question could have got answered earlier had Kalli got the right word to describe the relationship. So the right word to describe the relationship is actually a partner, right? And partnership is in our DNA, right? And that is the balance that then inherently exists in this relationship, right? And I'll tell you why. I know you're nodding your head sideways. So I want to know what nod that is. But
that's a negative nod, because it's all very nice to say, but tomorrow your algorithm changes and those guys jump down. What happens?
No. It just doesn't work like that at all. And let me explain to you what this partnership DNA is that I'm talking about, right? So we have three stakeholders, right, to think about and balance, right? One stakeholder is obviously the user. The other stakeholder is the creator and the partner. The third stakeholder is, let's say, the advertiser in a sense. There are many other stakeholders emerging also as we are navigating this complicated ecosystem, right? But some of our biggest advertisers, not just in India, but across the world, are actually other platforms and other media companies, right? And when we work with them, we are actually telling them what they need to do to grow their business, right? We work with a Netflix, or we might work with an Amazon, and often they would then ask us, okay, who is your biggest comedian, right? And we will then gladly point them to the comedy ecosystem so that they can then create the right kind of content or the right model to actually grow their content, right? So that is the partnership thing that I'm talking about, right? Across a partnership across all of these stakeholders. And trust me, I wouldn't have someone like Kalli saying the kind of things that she did if that was actually not true and not done in the truest and the right manner. So you should take back your sideways nod.
No, I don't, because that may be true for YouTube. It may not be true for Facebook. It may not be true for many other platforms. So you may be the good boy among the big boys. But my point is that with size comes the tendency to be a monopoly or behave like one. You may not have behaved. I'm not saying you have, but there is that thing. But I think I'm getting desperate messages to wrap this up. And I wish I could just sit over a glass of wine and chat with you guys on this, because this panel is like so nice. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. Ajay, Rasmus, Kalli, Satya, fantastic discussion. And I hope we can continue this separately on a one-on-one.
Thanks.
Vanita, please ask Ajay to call us all to one of his fantastic exhibitions. Like, he's opened this new Priya cinema in Basant Lok. He's redone the whole place with a glass of wine, which he can totally provide us, and wood fired oven pizzas, right?
Yeah,
Ajay, you're playing host now.
I think that a glass will not be enough, but definitely.
Bottle, okay. And we will do the exploration together, Ajay.
Definitely. Love to do
Well,
that.
Rasmus will get left out sitting there. But
oh no, I'm looking forward to the next trip to India. Very much so.
We'll make it happen. Guys.
And now that we've stopped fighting, Rasmus, UK and India, you can actually come without quarantine, right?
Yes.
You can do it.
We should do this. Great,
right.
super. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Vanita.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Pradeep.